ओम सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। ओम श्री गणेशाय नमः। ओम श्री सरस्वत्यै नमः। ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पाद शंकरं लोकशंकरं समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरं मूकं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानंदमाधवम परमानंदमाधवम। Hariom. So we are into the last session of this Manashodhanam series, and I do have received questions, lots of them actually. So first we will go through those questions, and then if anybody has got any questions on these answers or on some other topic, please you can ask. We'll start with in the same order that I have received. Okay, I have not reordered them, etc. Let us keep each one separate. First question: how to do seva to Guru, sharing his vision? How? No matter what I do, I always feel I am doing not enough. So Anujaji has asked this question. See, the best way to do seva is to follow the teaching. And Guru has taught us so much that it will never be enough, whatever we may do. So it is actually a very good thought to have that I am not doing enough. Because the moment I feel that I am doing enough, I become complacent. So to have that feeling that whatever I do is still not going to be enough is actually a good thing to have. Okay, so don't feel that this is something that is not good for me. It is good for you, but at the same time we have to also understand that at the moment this much I can do. So we should not get into overthinking about it, that I am not doing enough, I am not doing enough. That should not take precedence. One second. That should not take precedence over the thought of doing seva. I hope the point is now clear, right? How to do seva, how to understand his vision. The more we start to think about his teaching, we will understand the vision. It is not something which is very difficult. The more we are in line with the thinking, we will be able to understand. Okay, so that is that. Have I answered, Anujaji? Can I go forward? Just give me one moment. Right. Next question is, kindly help in analyzing ego and how to address or attack it. Now, ego is a very interesting factor. See, because it does not leave us that easily. Are you able to hear me properly? There's
yes, very clear.
No, we can hear you very clearly.
Yeah, just give me one moment. So the more I try to get rid of that ego, the more it comes up, right? So what we must understand is that this ego is something that we all have to work on, right? Some loose connection is there. TV is going. So coming back to that, ego is something that rises whenever we do something good or we do something bad, because it is our defense mechanism. When I do something wrong, it pops up and gives reasons. When I do something good, it comes up to take all the credit. So it is very important that we deal with this ego appropriately. And how to do that? The best way actually for ego to go is to develop devotion. Because in devotion, what happens? Surrendering ego is the first step. The entire Bhakti Marga starts with the surrender, right? So I am nothing. If you would have seen in all the great Santa and Mahatmas, all the saints, they will have this Dina Bhava. Sometimes we don't understand that why they are saying so much that I am nothing. I am Kumati, 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 like that. They will go on saying that how God blessed me. I don't know, because I am nobody. And when they say something like this, we get very surprised, because we are even below that, way below that. Then we don't understand what should I say now if the saints are saying like this. But see, it becomes natural to them because they are actually feeling it. And it is actually true also. We may say 100 things that, I have done this, I have done that. Actually speaking, without God's grace, we cannot lift our own finger. Forget about lifting mountains and all. That's the fact. The more we understand God and his ways of working, the more we become humble. So I think the way to attack ego is to develop devotion. Even in Karma Yoga, in Seva Bhava also, this ego, becomes slowly less. But there is a little problem with that path, in the sense, not with the path, but with the way we do it, is sometimes we do seva and we start to gain ego for that also. That, see, I am doing so much. It's exactly opposite to the first question, where you feel that you are not doing enough. Here you start feeling that because of me only it is happening. We come to organizations like Chinmay Mission, which are spiritual organizations, and then we say that, because of me organization is running. Very nice. And we have this funny feeling. I remember when many times I had gone to Divine Life Society ashram in Rishikesh, Swami Shivanandaji's ashram. And on one side, of course, is the ashram, and on another side is the office towards Gangaji's side. And when you walk down to go into that office, right on top of that, it is written that everybody is indispensable.
Yes.
Nobody should feel that what we say, that without me nothing can happen. So when people ask this question also, when Gurudev used to give very interesting answers, that, Swamiji, when I went there, nothing was there. And then I ran, and then this whole program we organized. What if I would not have gone? What would have happened? Gurudev would quietly say it would have been much better. Because we have this funny feeling that everything is running because of us. Right? The more we understand God's ways, we understand that it is God only who is doing it through us also. Very famous story to go with this is, we all know the story of Bhagavan Shri Krishna when he lifted the Govardhana mountain to save all the Vrindavana Vasis. And it is said that for 7 days, Bhagavan was carrying the mountain on his left hand little finger. Okay, left hand little, because so simple for him, to indicate that he was carrying that. Now his friends, etc., who were there in the audience, and they were looking, because Bhagavan is standing on little higher platform and all other people are there, and they are all gopas, they are all cowherds. Therefore, they have the stick with them, the stick that they take to, graze the cows, etc. That stick is there with them. So they started feeling that, Shri Krishna, so, pavam fellow, bichara, 7 days he started standing there, we should give some support. So what we will do? So all of them, they put their stick on that Govardhana mountain. Hey, that we are also, giving you support. After some time, they got thought that the Govardhan mountain is standing because of their sticks. See, this is what happens in seva sometimes. We start doing something as a service, but later on we think that it is happening because of me. So Bhagavan Sri Krishna also understood that now I need to explain to them that it is not like that. So he just removed his finger for a moment, maybe to clean his ear, something. I don't know why he removed, but he removed, and then tuck, 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 all the sticks broke. And then again Bhagavan put it. And people understood that it is Bhagavan only who is carrying the mountain. We are just supporting for our feeling. It is not that the work is happening because of us. It is for our feeling that, yeah, we were part of it, right? So more we have devotion, more we understand this point, and ego becomes less and less. Actually, as I had said earlier also, in Chinmay Mission, when we take up big projects, we really understand that we can't do anything, that we are good for nothing people, and what all mistakes we have done, we really understand, but still program happens nicely, nothing goes wrong. That is by God's grace, by Puja Gurudev's blessings only. So more we do seva, more we devote on this path, we start to make it happen. What? That ego starts to become thinner and thinner, right? Next question.
Thank you.
Lakshmi, Hari Om. Next question. Mind is powerful and keeps going back to objects of desire. How can we change habits that do not help us to progress? The way to change habits is a slow change process. Don't expect that suddenly things will be different. That is number one. Number two, when we have to change habits also, we must substitute them with good habits. That is another important way, because if you say that, okay, I am doing this thing which is wrong, which is not good for me, and I want to change it, think of what you are going to do in that place and make sure that it is not bad. For example, some person says that I am smoking and I have to get rid of that habit, therefore I will start drinking. That is not the correct substitution. But I have heard, I have read also somewhere that people who want to quit smoking, they put pencil in their hand, because their hands have gotten used to keeping cigarette there. So when it is not there, the mind is disturbed. So they put the pencil in their hand. I have also seen people who had that habit of eating tobacco, etc., replacing it, substituting it with soap, what we eat after. Now it is not bad for health. It is not bad for health, but at the same time, it is substituted also. So I am not saying that you have to have some addiction, and therefore to get rid of one addiction, you get into another addiction. That's not what I'm saying, but I am saying substitute it wisely. As Gurudev says, no, that introspect daily, detect diligently, negate ruthlessly, substitute wisely. When you want to negate something, you substitute. So I have a bad habit of getting up late. I'm just telling you an example. Now it is easy to say that, okay, from tomorrow I'm going to get up early. But the point is, what are you going to do? That sleep in the morning that you want to get rid of, what are you substituting it with? If you say that, okay, I'm going to get up early in the morning and watch TV, it is better you sleep. Unless you're watching something spiritual on TV, getting up early in the morning and that beautiful weather and everything is so auspicious for you, and you are going to do this, it's better you sleep, and at least the body will be resting and mind will be much better than all the garbage that you put in, right? So a way to change habit is by substituting it correctly. That is one way. Third point is in that if you really feel that it is bad for you, you will get rid of it immediately. Many times what happens is we don't feel that strongly. We have attitude of chalta hai. Little bit of here and there, it's okay. Chalta hai. That chalta hai attitude will take us to difficulty. It's okay. Little bit only, no. I am not drinking and doing so many bad things. This much is okay. Okay. Unless we feel strongly that this is not good for me, we will not give up. So that is third way of changing the habits. It is natural for mind to go to its desired object. Interesting thing to do is to change the desire, then mind will start going behind it. Just as before coming to spiritual path, every weekend, what were we looking forward to? We were looking forward to sleeping. We were looking forward to going somewhere and eating. But after we get the taste of spirituality, we look forward to more and more satsangs, more and more sessions, more and more camps, retreats. Now that is what is called as changing the habit. I am not saying that don't take break. Break is required from the daily work, but you take break with what? If on weekend you are going to take break from the work by doing this, by attending spiritual sessions and by thinking or by studying, it is much better work, much better break, right? Rather than just going somewhere and eating, etc. Okay, think about it. Next question. Subconsciously and unrealistically, based on Vichara, Viveka and Vimochana principle towards God realization, we push ourselves for absolute abstinence on all fronts and invariably fail. How do we draw a balance and keep the guilt feeling away? Nagesh ji has asked this question. See, the way is, you have answered actually in the question itself, that it should not be absolute abstinence on all fronts. You yourself have told that, because famous middle path shown by Sri Gautam Buddha is similar to this. When he understood that there is so much of sorrow in the world, sarvam kshanikam kshanikam, sarvam dukkham dukkham, everything is so sorrowful. When he encountered those 4 incidences, we all know the story. He suddenly decided that I am not going to do anything else. So no eating, no sleeping, and no going anywhere, just sit and meditate. Now his body became so weak, he was not able to understand also anything, he was not able to even think. And that's where he understood that no, this total abstinence won't work. And that's where he gave the famous middle path. Middle path means what? Have a balanced life. Now, how to have this balanced life? Bhagavad Gita says very beautifully, Yukta ahara viharasya yukta cheshtasya karmasu yukta swapnavabodhasya yogo bhavati dukkhaha. How to strike this balance? We may feel that we want to do so many things, but do it slowly. Suddenly Manashodhanam session is over, and therefore now you have got so many things. Therefore you say, now from tomorrow what all things I am going to do? I am going to do puja in the morning, then japa, followed by meditation. Then I am going to study 10 chapters of Bhagavad Gita. And after that I am going. It is not going to happen. Suddenly one day all these things will not happen. You have to go slowly, bring one good habit, allow it to be part of your and then let it become part of your daily routine. Then after 20-25 days, bring another. Suddenly you see that we may, on paper, we may say that from tomorrow 5 o'clock I am going to get up. That will remain on paper. You may do it once or twice, but it will never become routine. To make it into routine, bring one thing slowly. So pick up that one sadhana or one thing that you want to do immediately, right? And bring it. Then just follow that one thing for 15-20 days. Don't bring anything else, right? Then bring another one. That is the slow method. Then there won't be any guilt, any kind of fall, no suppression will be there. Why? Because suddenly if you start to do everything, it may cause that, right? Hope Nagesh ji have answered.
Thank you.
Let us go next one. I have unquenched faith in my guru and in his teachings. However, my thirst for knowledge doesn't rest here, and I look for more knowledge outside to get better understanding from different scriptures. Is this spiritual shopping? This sometimes creates a guilt in me. Is this disloyalty to my guru? Very interesting use of word, Anuja ji. Spiritual shopping. I will think on that little more. But you see, there is nothing wrong with studying more and more. There is nothing wrong with it. But at the same time, we have to also understand how much of it is more of it will not work. I'm not saying don't study more. I am saying now try to focus on whatever I am studying, how much percent of it or how much of it I am actually be able to practice. Right? So keep the focus on that. Then that going from here and here to there and trying different things will stop. Also, sometimes it happens that you start one thing and after some time you leave that thing and go to something else. Then leave that's not a good thing. Whatever you have taken now, complete it. Right? That kind of thing will help. And it is not disloyalty to Guru, because Guru will never stop you from studying what is good for you. It's actually he will be happy. We have so many examples. One example, of course, is our own Pujya Gurudev. When he took Diksha from Swami Shivanandaji Maharaj, he was his Guru. He was the one who transformed Gurudev. But the moment Shivanandaji Maharaj understood that he has got more questions and his quest and liking is towards serious studies, he sent Gurudev to Taponji Maharaj. He himself saying that you now go and study from him. And that continued. What I mean is, when Gurudev started mission, Chinmay mission, some of his students wanted to study, therefore he sent them also to Taponji Maharaj. He didn't say that, oh, come to me only, don't go anywhere else. He sent them to other people to study further. We have so many such examples. So Guru will not be unhappy that you are studying more. But Guru will be more happy if you are bringing those ideas to your life. Greatest way to serve a Mahatma is to follow his teaching. Always remember that thought. So what he has said, if I can follow, that's the greatest service. As long as I am doing that, there is no disloyalty. Let us go further. You had mentioned in the last session, while explaining the Pramanas, Brahman is not the cause or the effect. I am under the impression that Brahman plus Maya, its intrinsic divine energy, is Ishvara at the macrocosmic level, and Brahman plus Maya is Jiva at the microcosmic level. How can Brahman not be the cause of the universe or cosmos? Please explain. Because everything is Maya or illusion, there is no cause or effect. Question mark. Oh, is there no cause and effect? So Brahman is neither the cause or the effect of anything. Is my understanding correct? Preeti ji has asked this question. Everything is the first thing is everything is Maya doesn't mean there is no cause effect relationship. Within the Maya also there can be cause effect relationship. That's not the reason for Brahman not being the cause or the effect. Why it is said Brahman, some of people may be wondering, okay, this is from a different class. I think she has got this question. But anyways, now that question is there, I will answer. We say Brahman plus Maya is Ishvara, fine. What is the role of Brahman and what is the role of Maya in creation? That also should be understood clearly. Brahman is presence. Maya is the creator. So Maya becomes the cause in presence of Brahman. Brahman doesn't do anything. Brahman is mere presence. To give you example, if I dash my car to a pole, the cause of that accident is not petrol. The cause of the accident is the person who is driving on the steering wheel. Without the petrol, the car cannot move. But that doesn't mean petrol is responsible for the accident. I hope the point is clear now. So in presence of Maya, in presence of Brahman, Maya creates. Bhagavan Shri Krishna says, Maya adhyakshena prakritihi suyate sacharacharam. Hetunanena kaunteya jagadviparivartate. Maya adhyakshena. I am just there as a presence. Prakritihi suyate. The Maya creates. And therefore, Brahman doesn't become cause. Because if Brahman really becomes cause, then the effect will be real. You understand? If the cause is real, then the effect also will become real. It is something like saying that there is a rope which I misunderstand as snake. Now that snake, is the rope cause of the snake? No. The cause of the snake is my delusion. Rope is the substratum. It is just there.
But everything manifests from Brahman, right?
Now that is a manner of saying that everything manifests from Brahman. It is a manner of saying that the snake has manifested from the rope. But that doesn't mean rope has created the snake. You see the difference? It is a manner of saying that everything is manifested. Why that is also required? Because it is the final substratum. So from it, everything has come. In it, everything is there. And into it only, everything is going to go.
Right. So
In that way, everything has come, is staying, and it will go back to
Brahman.
but that doesn't make it a cause. This is just one answer I have given. In philosophy, etc., lots and lots of discussion happens here. Especially Shankaracharya takes up this topic many places. Why Brahman can never become the cause? Because other philosophies want Brahman to be the cause, so that it will become impermanent, changing.
Okay.
Right?
Thanks.
I think that is sufficient. Shall we go to the next question? Yes. You said that we need a guru to guide us and that the guru will find you. Does it mean that guru must be in a living form? How will we know? It doesn't mean that guru has to be in living form. For example, now somehow we have come in contact with Chinmay Mission. Gurudev may not be there in a physical form, but he is our guru, isn't it? So how it happened? Did we go in search of anything like that? No, somebody told us that there is some program happening and we went there to see what it is. Then we got associated with it more and more. Right? So it is not necessary that guru has to be in living form. Right? Second part of the question is, how will we know? Very difficult to answer this. It is something like answering, how do I know that I have fallen in love with somebody? There are no parameters. Movies may tell you that when you cannot sleep at night, when food doesn't interest you, when there are violins playing in the background, nothing like that happens. This is all movie ideas that have gone into our head. We just intrinsically know that we love somebody, isn't it? You can't really put it into writing. That okay, this happened, this happened with you, okay, tick. Then next, this happened with you. Can't put like that. It's a very individual experience. So when the guru comes in our life, we just know it. We just know it that okay, that's it, done. And it is impossible to explain others, and it is not worth explaining others also that you have what you have found. But you will know for yourself that you have got it. Okay, so don't worry, it will happen. Okay, next. I have been listening and following various gurus on their teachings, but now I seem to have the need for a guru who can guide me further into my path, but I am unsure how to go about it. You said a guru will come when one is ready. Should I just continue with whatever I am currently doing? Yes. Just continue doing more and more sadhana, study, etc. Automatically, the path will become clear. Guru will be there, and see, this is something I can see. Also, many questions are asked about this concept of guru, and I understand why those questions are coming also, because for many this may be a completely new territory, never been there. Some other people are wondering, why are they asking so much? That is because we are lucky that from childhood we have been raised in such environment from young days that we have got the guru. But for many, it may not be the case. Okay, so please have sympathies towards them and understand their, sincerity in asking these questions. Right? So it is true that you can never be sure about it. But as I told you in the previous answer also, you will know for yourself whether this is the one or not. right? It is not, when they say match made in heaven, it applies more for guru and shishya than the husband and wife, because it is really match made in heaven, because something just strikes, some wavelength just matches, and then and to feel that I need somebody personally or physically to be there and guiding me is a valid feeling. And therefore I will not say that it is something wrong, but please understand that there can be many other people who also will be able to guide you. Doesn't have to be guru only. A teacher can guide you. Some other people who have studied spirituality can guide you. Scriptures themselves become great guide for us, right? So keep doing it and the things will keep happening, right? By the time we find a guru, we also must understand what exactly I should ask that guru. That is also very important, because sometimes we go to somebody, a great Mahatma, and we ask such foolish questions. Foolish not in the sense of my understanding, but foolish in the sense of purview of that question. What is the subject matter of that question? That way, foolish questions sometimes we ask. We go there and we ask, what do you think about today's politics? Why are you asking spiritual leader about that, spiritual person about that? It is wasting your opportunity to ask. Remember this. Pariprashnena sevaya, through the question answer method, you have to approach a guru, but that should be related to spirituality. You ask something very, what we say, something that will help you in progressing, right? So till that time, keep refining yourself, keep making yourself pure, keep opening up, and guru will find you, right? Next question. To follow any spiritual sadhana, for example, like purifying the mind, we need self-will, purushartha, to overcome the effects of prarabdha. While the forces of prarabdha or vasanas impinge on the mind or intellect, what is the driver or source for self-will that arises in the mind or intellect and tries to overcome the effects of prarabdha or vasanas on them? In other words, what triggers conditions for free will to manifest, and also how do we know if the choices we make are predominantly from prarabdha or purushartha? To what extent is free will really free? Anandji has asked this question. Self-effort or free will is generally translated as purushartha, and prarabdha means the destiny part of it. Things that come to my life in a particular way is prarabdha. Vasanas also is a third factor that contributes towards every action of mine. So when I am actually acting, there are these three factors working together. Working together means not they three are together, but at the same time they all are working. That's what I mean. Now the question here is, how can we give importance to purushartha so that the vasana pressure and the prarabdha will not affect? That's the question actually. And how do we know whether I am working according to purushartha or prarabdha? That's another question. First of all, understand the connection. My present purushartha is my future prarabdha, and therefore my present prarabdha is my past purushartha. Simple logic. Okay, so purushartha itself is going to be converted into prarabdha, right? So that is number one. Number two, prarabdha is not always bad. Number two. Number three, vasanas are also not always bad. Sometimes when we say that I have to get rid of this vasana pressure, what we must also understand is sometimes we should not get rid of vasana pressure, because vasanas may be instinctively guiding us correctly. Because vasanas are also formed after repeated performance of action, isn't it? So if I am doing many good things, I will automatically be going towards good things. Now, why to put Purushartha there? Let it flow according to it is going. And to choose not to do anything is also Purushartha. Understand? Allowing our body and mind to function according to Vasana, that allowing is also Purushartha. I hope you are getting my point. Think of something like this. Suppose I am a cricket team captain, and nowadays very often, they are into DRS, third umpire, whether I should go for it or not. Now, the ultimate decision has to be of the captain. But sometimes the captain goes with the instinct of the wicketkeeper. Because he says that last time I went, before that I went, before that I went, before that I went, and it all was correct. So let me go ahead with it. So last time when this situation was there, I acted according to this and it was correct. And before that, so let it happen. So it is captain's decision that I will allow the decision of wicketkeeper to go ahead. Similarly, it is my decision that I allow Vasana pressure to work. Vasanas are not always bad. So if good Vasanas are functioning, I allow it to happen. That is also Purushartha. So what I am trying to say here is, every time don't take it as Purushartha versus Prarabdha or Purushartha versus Vasanas. Doesn't have to be like that all the time. What is intelligently we should do is, if it is against, if Vasanas are against me, against what is good for me, that is the place where Purushartha has to change the Vasanas. Only those places. All other things we have to let it happen.
But do we really have free will? Everything is God's will.
And what if God's will is that you will get what you wish? Think about it. God has not created machines, you see. God has not created machines.
Okay.
God has given human beings intelligence to use. No doubt nothing can go, when we say that nothing can go without God's will, what it means is that he has covered all the outcomes. Whatever you may choose will still remain in God's will. But what you choose in between that is your free will.
Thank you.
It is something like there is a pole and an animal is tied to that. Sometimes cows, etc., are tied with a rope. Now, if the rope is long, for that much space, the cow can move. The cow is free to move in the area that is given. Now, whether the cow still sits at the same place and does not move, or keep moving, is up to the cow. But still it is happening as per the will of the owner. Similarly, when it is said, see, Bhagavan is all powerful, isn't it? What does it mean? That whatever you may choose, it will still remain in God's will. That's what it means. Everything happens by God's will, no doubt about that. That doesn't mean that we don't have freedom. Often in the Puranic stories, etc., also, whenever they want to give some boon, they will say Tathastu. Tathastu means may it be so. May it be so means whatever you wish, may it be so. What if he is saying Tathastu only? Now the whole thing is on us. What we wish for, what we choose. Right? So though everything happens by God's will, we still have free will for sure. Now the question is, how, to what extent do we have? It depends on you. There is no extent actually to free will. The extent is infinite. Why? Because the extent is that you can get rid of the samsara itself. What other extent you need? The Maya, which has created all these concepts of Prarabdha, you can go beyond the Maya itself by using your free will. That much extent it has.
Thank you.
right? So whether prarabdha is changed or not because of purushartha, that is a different question altogether. That is a different question, because how strong is prarabdha, how much you have put efforts, all that will matter. But what is the extent? There is infinite extent. Anything can happen, anything you can do by purushartha. Anandji, I hope I have answered. Anything else?
Basically, just one question. One of the questions is, so where does Purushartha get triggered? Is it intellect is the place where the Purushartha
Yes.
gets triggered?
Intellect, yes.
Yeah. So intellect is really the precursor for the Purushartha to trigger, based on what I've cultivated my intellect for, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
We'll go to the next question. After studying and having the basic knowledge of our scriptures, I understand that the next step is to dive deeper into those learnings. Whenever I start this thinking process, my mind gets disturbed and I am not able to continue further. Furthermore, my mind prevents me from the thinking process, saying these learnings are logical. So why to do thinking? Therefore, I am not able to do the inquiry which you mentioned. While the inquiry into self-behavior happens with ease, when it comes to inquiry on the spiritual lessons, my mind becomes lazy and satisfied with learning through logics. How to come out of this and do deep inquiry? Meenakshi ji has asked this question. See, the point is very simple. The moment you take up spiritual inquiry, the mind will retaliate because it knows that you are doing something against it. Mind knows that you are working against it. So it is going to say that, no, this is not logical, or I want to only work on logic and not the spiritual part of it. Mind will say all these things. You do what you must do. Let mind do what it does. Don't stop because mind is saying. That's the part of training the mind. The moment mind says that this is not what I want, you go against it and say, but this is what I want. I am the master. I will decide what we must do. So you may think that this is not logical, or this is only logic and what you are saying as self behavior, etc. Only those are the topics that you should think about. You may think that, oh mind, I am not going to listen to you. So something like this you have to keep doing to your mind, right? I hope that is also answered.
Thank you.
Next question. When too many things come to us at the same time, there is a tendency for the mind to want to do multitasking. How to avoid thinking of another job at hand while still doing the first one? Because of the simple fact that it disturbs you. You actually can't do this also and that also. For example, now I have one more class at 7 o'clock. Now, suppose while answering this, I start thinking about what am I going to speak in the 7 o'clock class. Neither I will be able to focus on that topic, nor I will be able to answer here. So it is something that you have to take it on yourself, saying that, okay, there are 100 things to do at this time, but at a time I can do only one. So let me do this one first, then I'll go to the next one. Then I'll go to the next one. It is a kind of habit that you have to put your mind into. And I see, I interact with so many youngsters. I see that kind of habit takes time to develop, because they are so much, what we say, distracted, because they want to do everything together, which is very, very wrong thing to do. Even if, suppose, for example, you want to enjoy, you need to just enjoy. You can't just say that today is my holiday from work and therefore I'm going to enjoy, and then in that enjoyment you go out with somebody, and then you start thinking about the work. What is the point then? This is also lost, that is also lost. So though there are 10 things to do, let me do first, then I'll go for second, then I'll go for third. I think that will help. Make a list, numbered list. And the moment you say 1, 2, 3, it means first that, then that, then that. It cannot be done together. Okay. Some gurus, in double quote, speak and explain the Shastras and have a huge following. Then they indulge in horrendous acts. how does a person, in spite of knowing the Shastras, fall so low? What if one had considered and trusted such a person as a guru? Question I am sure many of you might have had, but only few have courage to ask such type of questions. Let me answer in two different ways. Number one, just because a person has got a lot of following doesn't mean that person can become my guru. First point clear. Second point, we can never understand somebody's actions. So please don't listen to what media is telling. Okay, that may not be true. I remember some 4 or 5 years back when I was in Navi Mumbai also, some similar thing had happened and many people came and asked me, what is your opinion? I said, number one, I don't believe in media. So I don't know whether this really happened or not happened, because I have been very closely associated with some people, in media business before joining, and therefore I know how they function. Newspaper, I always used to wonder, they keep their font size same, then how is their paper from first page, first line till last page, last line, everything is filled? I mean, sometimes not a one line is missing. How do they do? Then one person from there explained to me that when one block is remaining, they put a thing that one person got murdered, body is not found, police is searching. Where, who, what? Nothing like that has happened. Where they have to fill that space. And body is not found, then how do you know murder has happened? Don't ask questions. Nobody is asking questions. So first of all, don't believe in hearsay. What I hear is true. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Number two, don't judge. We also sometimes get this question and we go with such questions to Guruji. Guruji, how can this person, we knew him, and how did he do this mistake? A simple answer that Guruji has always given us is, it is mind. And mind can fall. It doesn't matter whether it is your mind or my mind. Mind is mind and it can fall. Have compassion. Don't feel hatred towards that person. It is mind playing tricks. Even if for the sake of argument, we believe that somebody has done some horrendous act, don't be prejudiced towards that. Don't feel hatred towards it, because we actually don't know what exactly happened. And second thing, Gurudev used to say this, that when a person at that spiritual stature, even if that person falls, that person will get up quickly and go ahead, because they have done a lot of sadhana before. For that person, it is not very easy, very difficult to proceed. Problem will happen to all of us. Why? Because our faith is shaken up. And that is the reason Gurudev used to say that you should always believe in somebody who is non-living. Non-living means who was there in the past but not there now. Why? Because otherwise that doubt will keep coming. It is not that all the acts of the Guru you will be able to understand. I hope I am making sense. Don't believe in what people say. See, people did not leave Bhagwan Sri Rama also. Who are we? Bhagwan Sri Rama was a perfect person, isn't it? Purushottama. Even in his life, people have found mistakes. Where are you and me? So in everybody's life, people will find mistakes. It is up to us what we believe in. Always believe in one point, very sure, very clear, and that is Guru is Tattva and is not a person. The moment you understand this point clearly, Guru is a principle. Guru is Tattva. Guru is Shastra taken form. The moment we understand this, we follow the principle. We don't follow the person. I have met so many people who have long beard like Gurudev. Doesn't mean they become Gurudev. Because Gurudev never told us that I have long beard, therefore everybody, all of you also should have long beard. Then only you are my followers. That's not the way. That he never said, and it is not the way. But I have met many people who are not at all famous, but quietly doing what Gurudev told. Gurudev told me to remain in this place and serve. For 40 years, that person is staying in the same place and serving. Not gone higher in the hierarchy, nothing. Gurudev told me to do this, I am doing this. This is the sincerity. This is called following Guru. So don't go with all these flashing things. Go to the basic. And what is the basic? The basic is Guru is Tattva. Guru is a principle. Is a truth. Is not a person. The moment you separate out that principle from the person, a person may make mistakes. A principle will not. Principle, I hope you are understanding. PLE principle, not PAL principle. Right? He is a Tattva. I think that much is sufficient. Smita ji, if you have further doubt, you can ask.
No, thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Let us not get into all these horrendous acts, etc. That's none of our. That's not our area also to investigate.
Yes.
Right? Chalo. Some people tend to get up at the same time, no matter at what time they sleep. How to train the mind to wake up early? Is 7 to 8 hours sleep necessary for the mind and body to rest and rejuvenate, or is it all a matter of perception? It will only happen by habit. It will happen by habit. Every day, if you start getting up at the same time, later on, you don't even need alarm clock. You don't need it. It happens automatically. It happens. So by practice, it will happen. No matter at what time you sleep, your getting up time will be fixed. Number one. Number two, when you are asking whether that much rest is necessary, no, it is not necessary that 7 to 8 hours is not like that. But to begin with, 6 to 8 hours is what they say is necessary for the body. But as you proceed further in spiritual practice, you will understand that the energy comes from that spiritual practice. So then that 6 to 8 hours may not be required. Oh, many Mahatmas are there who sleep for 3 hours, 4 hours, and that is sufficient for them. But that is because of their spiritual sadhana that has gone and that is giving them energy. To begin with, 6 to 8 hours is sufficient for us. Should not be more than that or should not be less than that also. To begin with. Okay. And as we go forward, we ourselves understand that it is not necessary. See, what is most important is which 6 to 8 hours am I going to rest? That will decide everything else. If really we sleep by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, count from there 6 to 8 hours, we are fresh. To bring this small change into your life, you will understand that afternoon nap, etc. also is not required. You will remain fresh throughout the day. Okay. But you see, according to your lifestyle, how much sleep is necessary. Next question is, what is the difference between Vasana and Swadharma? So here I presume that Swadharma here is referred to as what we call as inclination, finding one's Swadharma, and not the Swadharma in terms of duty. Is that understanding correct, Smita ji?
Yes, yes.
Then it will mean same. You can either call it Vasana, you can call it as natural inclination, you can call it as samskara, you can call it as Swadharma. The only difference between them is Vasana is much broader. It has got all kinds of inclinations, impressions. So whether I like tea or coffee is also a Vasana, but that cannot be Swadharma. Swadharma is more specific. Swadharma, you can say a subset of Vasana, which captures your natural inclination towards life, and not just these specific inclinations or impressions. Vasana is much more broader term, which encompasses everything in it. So when it is said finding your Swadharma, you find out what is natural to you. We are talking about that specific thing. into our life. What comes natural to us. That is called as Swadharma. It's a subset of vasanas, I would say. Hope that answers.
Thank you.
Two more questions have come. How to overcome attachment to relationship? First, do you understand what it means to overcome attachment? That is my question. Keyuriji, you can answer, then I will answer further.
Attachment is raga.
But when I say that I have to reduce my attachment with my relations, it doesn't mean that I stop loving them.
Yeah.
I hope that point is clear. If that point is clear, then the answer is very simple. How to overcome? Reduce the expectation. When I reduce the expectations from anybody, automatically my attachment reduces. I am not reducing love towards them. I am reducing my expectations from them. So the love remains same, my expectations go on decreasing, my attachment reduces. Okay.
Wonderful.
And how will I reduce my expectation? Because I understand that relatives are relative. They are relative. They are there when they need us, not when I need them. So faster you understand this, easier for us. Okay. And not just relative, everybody in the world. Okay. You all have come here together because you have asked question and I am answering. Suppose I ask questions and you have to answer, 60 people would not be here. Very simple. It is as simple as that. People remember us when they need us. They don't remember us when we need them. And if at all some people are like that, then it's good for us. Then it is love that pours out, not the attachment with such people. Right? What is the purpose of life? Next question and last question in the list. What is the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to find that source of happiness so that I can ever remain happy. That is the purpose of life for all of us. We may not realize it, but that's the purpose. Why are we living? Why are we alive? Why are we living? Because we want to be happy. And therefore, any kind of sorrow that comes to us, we are uncomfortable. We want to get rid of it, come out of it as soon as possible. Suppose somebody says that, come here, I will give you happiness. And what kind of happiness? I'll give you a lot of happiness for 5 minutes or little happiness for 1 year. You will say, I want neither. I want a lot of happiness for all the time. So the purpose of life is to find out the source itself of that happiness so that I can remain happy throughout. The only difference is, do I find that source or do I search for that source outside or do I search for it inside? The moment I start searching for the source of happiness inside, then it becomes spiritual purpose. I hope you remember this point which we had discussed earlier. Spirituality begins when we start to search for the source of happiness within us. Why? Because it is within us. So the purpose of life is to find that source.
Pranav.
All right. So the questions that have come to me are over. Is there anybody who has asked in chat?
There are no questions.
Yes. Somebody has said, Nagesh ji, did you have?
Yes, I did have. Thank you, Vedji. Now, my question was this not related to Manashodhanam. See, the concept is, the spiritual concept is that the Brahman or the Supreme Being is within all of us. Okay. Having said that, we also understand the concept of vasanas, the past karma, etc., etc. So, is the behavioral differences that are there in people a function of the extent of spiritual realization. Because everything we keep putting it on either the past karma or prarabdha, whatever we were discussing a little before. I just wanted clarity on that.
So behavioral differences are because of the difference in mind of people. And mind of a person is result of prarabdha. And that doesn't mean it is result of prarabdha means is in some other person's hand. Prarabdha is our own past actions, okay? That comes as prarabdha. So what my mind is at the moment is result of all my actions that I have performed, because of which my mind is like this. Now, because you have performed different kinds of actions, your mind is different from me. So behavioral differences is because of difference in the mind, not difference in the consciousness aspect, not difference in the Brahman aspect of it.
Thank you.
Right. Anybody else also have any question? We still have some time. Please feel free.
This is Kiran here.
Yes, I can't see you, but now I can see. Yes, Amma, please tell.
You just said a little while ago that when you reduce the love will not become less, but you reduce the attachment by not with expectation. So, but what I feel, I don't know, but I feel that when you have love towards any relative or something, could be your spouse, your children, anybody, the expectation does come in, and though you know you should not expect anything, but if you reduce your expectation, somehow the love, also when love grows, expectation grows. Like, it's like side by side.
No. Just think about it. So let me go one by one. First of all, the expectation grows with a person because you think that they are mine. Because they are mine. They belong to me. That's what you think, and that's how expectation grows. Actual understanding should be what? That we both are co-passengers. It's not that we both belong to God only. We both are traveling together in this life. That doesn't mean they belong to me. And actually what you said, no, the more expectations grow, sorrow grows, not love. Because there are more chances of expectations not being fulfilled.
Yeah.
I have more number of expectations, I have less love actually. Because love is happiness, simple equation there. Another way to explain to you this is, as age goes, as age increases, you are with a person for a lot of years, you will automatically see that your expectations have reduced. Isn't it? Love has not reduced. Now that is what we call as understanding. That's what we call as understanding between the spouses, saying that, okay, the wife knows that the husband today is in bad mood and therefore he will talk all kinds of things, but I know it. She still goes on Vata Purnima day and ties the thread. Many people, they wonder, what is this? You all the time you are fighting and still you want the same husband for next 7 births. She says, this is the fighting is the outer layer of love. I understand where it is coming from. So the wife has understood that even when the husband shouts, where were you? It is out of concern more than anything else. So actually expectations reduce and love increases. Just observe it little more closely and you will understand this point. Also, when expectations reduce, as I said, you become more compassionate towards the person because you understand that it's natural. When expectations are more, you are not thinking about that person. You are thinking about yourself. How dare he speak like this? This is what is your response. How dare they behave like this with me? Why? Because my focus is on my expectations. The moment focus changes, you say, today must be in bad mood. you don't make that person bad because that person has said something bad. You say that anger is speaking. He's not speaking, anger is speaking. When can this happen? When you don't have any expectations. It's very irony, okay? Big irony that the brahmachari is telling you all these things to have more experience, okay? You will be able to guide me better in this way.
No,
You
Ved,
may,
we're learning a lot, and this question answers have really answered a lot of questions.
I am just giving you a spiritual angle of this. I'm sure all of you are living this life will be able to give much more perspective to all these questions. I am just giving a spiritual side of it.
Thank you.
Sometimes they say no, third person will be able to tell you better. The person in the problem will not be able to tell. That's the third person's angle is what I'm giving. Right. Anybody else? Any other question? Yes, Jagdishanji, please ask. Please ask. Unmute yourself and then ask. There will be a button. Yes.
The role of trigunas in life and how we can increase the sattva.
First part of the question, I didn't hear. Role of?
The role of triguna, the sattva, rajas, and tamas in an individual.
The role of trigunas.
Yeah.
Everything is run by trigunas only. Actually, they are the actors. They are not playing one role. They are the entire cast of our movie. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. They are only doing all the things. The importance is to which kind of actor do we feed? Sattva, good actor, a hero, or a villain, or a person who remains on the side and says that let it happen. I am not going to get involved. Whom do we feed? That is what is important. Swami Purushottam used to say very beautiful thing, you know, that in our mind, in our heart, there are all kinds of foxes. Fox. Cunning one is there and a good one is there. It is important to whom we feed. The one whom we feed becomes stronger and overpowers the other. Similarly, if we keep feeding Sattva Guna, it will become stronger and it will overpower Rajas and Tamas. How do we feed Sattva? By studying, by doing sadhana. These are the ways that we feed Sattva.
Doing seva.
By doing seva. 3S they always speak of. Swadhyaya, sadhana, and seva. Swadhyaya, study. The Jnana Marga path. Sadhana, our daily sadhana, Bhakti Marga path. And seva, of course, Karma Marga path. Right? So through Swadhyaya, sadhana, and seva, we keep feeding Sattva, it grows. It becomes stronger.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hari.
Thank you.
So I think we are done. So last 5 minutes, I express my gratitude to one and all present here for giving me this chance of reflecting on this wonderful text composed by our Pujya Guruji, Swami Tejomayananji. Very beautiful, very insightful, and very, very practical. So I thank once again all of you, and to all the people in Chinmay Mahiman also for organizing this so that all of us can be part of it. Thank you once again, and I hand over to now Sunita for rest of the program.
Thank you,
Veji. Thank you.
Today, as you were answering the question and answer session, and I was reminded of your ability to talk about the highest concepts of Vedanta in such a simple manner that any of us is able to understand. And I'm so happy that happy and thankful to you that in your busy schedule, you said yes as soon as I asked you to be a part of this program, and you were able to give us so much time. Thank you so much, Puji. Thank you very much. All of us over here are very grateful to you. We are indebted. Thank you. I also thank the Mahima team, without whose cooperation this could not have happened, because I was not available, even though I was the coordinator. On many Sundays, I was not available. And it was because of them that this whole series of events happened so smoothly. Thank you very much to the whole team. I thank all of you who are here today, who have diligently participated every Sunday, made time, and we were able to have a satsang because of you. Thank you for making time. Above all, how can I forget Gurudev, Guruji, and Bhagwan? Without them, nothing happens. So finally, our final thanks is only to them. Thank you. And before we end today, I would like to share a happy news that Vedji has agreed to come back and teach us around September. We have not yet finalized the dates because that depends on some of the schedules that he has. So we will be we are talking on the text called Jivan Sutrani, which is composed and written by Pujya Guruji Swami Tejomayanand. It's a simple and a beautiful and very deep text. It looks very simple because it's called Tips of Happy Living. So we generally tend to, when such topics come, we tend to think it is a diluted text. It's not at all. I have had the opportunity to read it once, and it is a beautiful, simple text which gives us in-depth understanding on the tips of happy living, which we will be studying from September onwards. How many days and in what date, we don't know. We will get back to you. We will be in touch with you. Please check your emails regularly. You will get an email message for that. Thank you so much once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vedji. Thank you.
And those of
Thank
you
you,
who want
Vedji.
to,
Thank you,
one
Vedji.
more thing,
Thanks a lot, Vedji.
1 second.
just a second, I'm sorry. Those of you who would learn to offer Guru Dakshina and have not yet done it, we have the link put in the group, and I will once again put it up. You can use the link. Please understand that we do not offer NEFT services because it is difficult to trace the source of the Dakshina and to give receipts. So those of you who are unable to pay through the link, you can give us a check, and we will give you details of where the check can be couriered and in favor of whom it should be written. But NEFT facility, as of now, we are not encouraging. So either it's the link or the check. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sunita, and we'll conclude with prayer. I offer my humble seva at the lotus feet of Pujya Guruji, Pujya Gurudev. Whatever came out good, correct, whatever you liked is all their teaching. Whatever was wrong is my shortcoming. We offer this as our worship to the entire Guru Parampara. May they be pleased with this Vak Puja, with this worship through words. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Hari Om all. Thank you.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hari Om.
Hari Om. Hari Om.